The rancher, who found a young Apache girl hanging by a tree, and the message that turned his world upside down. The desert didn't speak much. That's why Calder Wyatt liked it. It left a man alone, gave him space to forget the world. But that morning, something cracked the quiet, a sound like a breath too thin to belong to anything living. He reined in his mare, heart slowing, listening. There it was again, a whimper, raw and frayed, like the end of a rope. He tied off the reins and stepped off the trail, boots crunching through dead brush and sunburnt earth. The clearing was hidden, tucked behind a line of gnarled cottonwoods. That's where he saw her. She hung by the wrists from the lowest limb. A girl, young Apache. Her head bowed, her body limp, arms stretched like the tree meant to claim her soul. Her skin was dark with sun and dirt, her lips cracked, her chest barely rising. She was alive, but only just. Above her, nailed crooked to the bark, was a splintered plank of wood. Letters carved in red, thick and angry. White man, don't forgive. Calder stepped back, breath catching. The words hit harder than the heat. Not just a warning, a curse, a verdict. The kind that didn't care about guilt, only blood. He swallowed hard and drew his knife. The girl groaned, just a whisper, but it anchored him. I ain't like them, he muttered. One clean slice and the rope gave. She fell, and he caught her before she hit the dirt. Her weight was nothing, bones and heat and something too broken to name. He looked down at her face, then up at the sign. Whatever this was, it wasn't just chance, and saving her wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something he couldn't turn back from. The ride back was slow. She didn't wake, didn't stir, just burned hot against him like a coal that refused to die. Calder kept one arm around her, the reins loose in his other hand, his mare picking a careful path through the dust. The sign still echoed behind his eyes, burned into the back of his skull like a brand. His ranch wasn't much, just a one-room cabin, a sagging barn, and a windmill that groaned when the breeze got bold. But it stood, and it was his. He laid her on the cot, draped his coat over her shoulders, and watched her sleep like a man watching a storm cloud that hadn't made up its mind. She didn't speak. Not that first day, not the second. Her eyes stayed closed, her lips still. Calder cleaned her wounds anyway, gentle and quiet. He spoke, not expecting answers. About the stubborn mule, about the fence line needing repair, about the weather. By the third morning, she blinked at him, just once. He crouched beside her, dipped a cloth into cool water, wiped her brow. You got a name? He asked. She didn't flinch, but her gaze slid past him, distant. He sat back on his heels, looked at her a long while, then nodded to himself. Lena, he said, like he was settling something inside him. That'll do for now. No protest came, just the slow rise of her chest. She wasn't his, not his problem, not his burden. But giving her a name felt like tying a rope to something drifting, just enough to keep it from being lost. He stood, went outside, and split wood until his hands ached. Inside, the girl he called Lena slept on, between fire and silence. The morning sun came slow, stretching shadows across the yard. Calder was feeding the mule when he saw it, just off the edge of the barn, half sunk in dust. A boot print, not his, too fresh, too clean, too military. He crouched low, studied it, the way a man studies the sky before it breaks. Then he stood and scanned the ridgeline. Nothing moved, but something had. Inside, Lena was awake, propped weakly on the cot. She didn't speak, didn't ask, just watched him with those dark, heavy eyes that saw more than he said. He didn't tell her about the print. Not yet. By noon, the knock came. A soldier, blue coat dusty, badge dull from sun. Calder opened the door slow, one hand resting on the frame. The man didn't smile, didn't bother with greetings. He just pulled a folded poster from his breast pocket. You seen her? He asked, voice clipped. The paper showed a girl, younger in the sketch, but it was her. Lena, hair long, eyes sharp, words scrawled beneath. Wanted for murder, escape, dangerous, a price beside it. Calder took the paper, didn't let his face move. Can't say I have, he said. You sure? He met the man's eyes. A lot of dust out here. Faces get lost in it. The soldier held his stare a moment too long, then gave a nod and walked back to his horse. Calder watched him ride off until the dust swallowed him whole. That night, he sat by the window, rifle across his lap, the poster folded in his pocket like a confession. Inside, Lena lay still. She hadn't asked what the knock meant, but she knew. And so did he. The desert was silent, but Calder's lie throbbed loud beneath his ribs. The goats were restless, pacing the fence line, ears twitching at shadows that didn't move. Calder felt it too, that pressure in the air like a storm thinking about forming. The kind of stillness that made your skin crawl, not from wind, but from everything that wasn't. Word had traveled. Too fast, too far. First it was Prescott, badge pinned crooked to his chest, riding up with two men behind him. They didn't dismount, just lingered by the gate, eyes scanning the barn, the porch, the hills beyond. "Just checking," Prescott said, voice oiled with fake friendliness. "Heard a girl went missing. Some say she was seen headed this way." Calder didn't blink. "Ain't seen nobody but goats and ghosts." They laughed, but it was dry, forced, the kind of laugh that warned more than it eased. Inside, Lena stood behind the curtain, still as stone, watching through the slit. She'd taken to walking again, slow and careful, but her steps always paused near the window, always listening. Prescott leaned forward in his saddle. "You'd tell us if you saw her, right?" Calder's jaw tightened. "You know me. I keep to myself." "Yeah," Prescott said, glancing at the house. "That's what we're worried about." When they finally rode off, Calder stayed on the porch long after the dust settled, watching the horizon like it owed him answers. Lena brought him water without a word. Their fingers brushed, just barely. He looked at her then, really looked, and saw it in her shoulders, her mouth, her eyes. She was waiting for something, maybe forgiveness, maybe a fight. The desert held its breath that night, and Calder knew. Stillness was just noise waiting to break. The wind was light that morning, barely enough to stir the dust. Calder sat on the porch, sharpening his knife, the slow scrape of steel on stone the only sound. Then he saw her. Lena stepped barefoot into the yard, her steps uneven but steady. She moved past the trough, past the coop, toward the wide patch of dirt by the barn where the wind had cleared the ground clean. She knelt slowly, like it hurt, like she remembered what it was to pray. She picked up a stick and began to draw. Calder didn't move at first, just watched. The way her fingers moved, careful, sure. It wasn't random. It was memory. Pain. He stood finally, walked over, slow and quiet, boots pressing soft into the earth. He stopped a few feet behind her. She didn't look up. The drawing took shape, sharp wings, widespread, fire curling up around the bird's body like it had flown into the sun and refused to turn back. The flames danced even in stillness, a creature rising or burning or both. Her voice came quiet, flat. "Bird in fire," Calder's breath caught, the first words she'd given him. She kept drawing. "It's ours, my family's. We paint it on tents, carve it on bones. Means we fly, even when the fire comes." He crouched beside her, not too close. The bird stared up from the dust, bold and broken. "They came last spring," she said. "Soldiers. Said we were danger. Said we had to move. We didn't." Her hand shook. "They burned everything. My mother died with her hands raised. My father, they hanged him." She dropped the stick. Her fingers curled into fists. Calder didn't speak. He just pressed his palm into the dirt beside hers. And stayed. The fire cracked low in the hearth, shadows flickering like ghosts across the walls. Calder sat across from her, elbows on his knees, a mug cooling in his hands. Lena stared into the flames, her face lit in orange and gold, but her eyes were somewhere far from the cabin. "They came with wagons," she said, voice steady, too steady. "Soldiers and townmen, priests even. Said a white woman was dead, found near our hunting ground. Said we did it." Calder didn't move. "We didn't," she added, softer now. Her husband killed her. Everyone knew. But we were close, and we were Apache. Her fingers clenched around the mug in her lap. They came in the dark, burned the tents, shot boys too young to hold a knife. My mother, she tried to pray. They set her tent on fire anyway. My father wouldn't run, so they made him hang. She blinked slow, as if each memory dragged behind her eyes like a stone in water. I ran, found a hollow tree, hid there. They found me the next day, tied me up, called me a thief, said I took a rifle. I didn't. She looked at Calder then, director, unflinching. I didn't do anything. The room held its breath. He nodded once, not out of pity, out of belief. They left me there, she whispered, tied to that tree, said others would come, maybe rescue me, maybe hang beside me. Her voice cracked. I was bait. Outside, the wind sighed against the window. Calder leaned back, jaw tight. Out here, truth don't count for much, he said. Only who's got the louder gun. She nodded. Not agreement, understanding. In this land, being innocent never meant you got to live, and they both knew it. The fire had burned down to coals, a soft red glow painting the floorboards. Calder stared into it like it held answers he hadn't dared ask in years. Lena sat curled in the corner chair, silent, watching him the way you watch a wild thing, careful not to startle it. He didn't look at her when he spoke. Spring 3 years back, he said, voice low. I was out hunting mule deer. Took me 2 days to track 'em. When I got back, the sky above the ranch was black. He shifted, jaw tight. Raiders. Maybe Apache, maybe not. That's what they said anyway. My sister, 16, she was still alive when I got there. I heard her crying in the barn. He paused. The silence stretched. I didn't go in, he said. I waited. Thought they might still be there. Thought I'd die too. He finally looked at Lena. She died before help came. Her eyes didn't flinch. She just held his gaze, steady and bare. No judgment, just knowing. I tell myself I was being careful, smart, but truth is, I was scared. The fire cracked. I buried her out back under the ash tree, he said. Haven't been right since. Lena's breath caught just slightly. Calder leaned forward, rested his elbows on his knees again. You asked why I cut you down. It's 'cause I couldn't cut her free. For a moment, the only sound was the wind kissing the windows. Then she stood and crossed the room, slow, sat beside him on the floor, knees brushing. She didn't touch him, didn't speak. She didn't need to. Their griefs didn't match, not exactly, but they fit. And in the dark, between two broken hearts, something small and warm began to live. The morning came slow, the kind that crawled across the land, like it was deciding whether to stay. Calder stood by the stove, stirring beans, letting the quiet wrap around him like an old coat. Lena sat near the window, knees tucked to her chest, wrapped in one of his worn shirts that hung off her like it belonged to a story not yet told. She hadn't spoken again since the firelight night. Just watched, just listened. But something had shifted. Her shoulders weren't so tight. Her eyes didn't dart at every sound. He set 2 tin plates on the table, slid one her way without a word. She didn't eat much, never did, but she took it. That was something. He sat across from her, spoon in hand, gaze steady but soft. You ever gonna tell me what to really call you? He asked, quiet. Or should I just keep calling you what I named a stubborn mule once? That almost earned a smile. She looked at him for a long moment, searching maybe, like weighing what it might cost to give him one more piece of herself. Then, softly, barely more than breath, she said, Ayana. He set his spoon down. Ayana, he echoed, slower this time, like the name was something sacred. That yours? She nodded once. My father gave it. Means peaceful river. He looked at her like he'd found something rare in the dirt, something worth keeping. Well, he said, the name warm in his throat. Ayana it is. No more hiding, no more guesses. She had a name again, and now, so did the space between them. She looked down at her plate, then back at him, and in the smallest voice yet, she said, Thank you. The smoke was thin at first, just a smudge in the sky to the east. Calder saw it before breakfast, a line rising too steady for brush fire. He didn't say a word, just watched it with his jaw set tight. By midday they came. Prescott at the front, 2 more men behind him this time, hard eyes, loaded rifles, horses mean from heat and long riding. They didn't ask permission, just rode straight up the path like the land owed them something. Ayana stayed inside behind the curtain. She didn't breathe loud. Prescott slid from his saddle, boots hitting the ground with a weight he wanted felt. "Heard talk," he said, squinting toward the porch. "That girl? She's still breathing. And she's breathing here." Calder leaned against the post, arms crossed. "Heard talk's all most folks got." "We want to check your place," one of the other men said, younger, angry. "You got a warrant?" Calder asked, calm as cooled steel. "This ain't a courthouse," Prescott muttered. "It's a warning." Ayana watched from the shadows. She could see it in Calder's stance, solid, unmoved, but his knuckles were white around the post, his mouth a little too tight. She knew that kind of stillness, the kind that hides fear under muscle and grit. Prescott stepped closer, voice low. "If she's here, Wyatt, you'll burn with her." Calder's eyes didn't blink. "Then I guess I better build a bigger fire." They didn't search the house, not this time, but when they rode off, they didn't look back. Inside, Ayana turned from the window. Her hands trembled just enough to spill water from the cup she held. Calder came in a moment later, said nothing, just looked at her. She met his eyes and whispered, "We have to go." The wind had quieted, but the weight in the air hadn't lifted. Calder stood by the barn, the wooden sign in his hands. It was rough and splintered now, the red letters faded, but still legible. "White man don't forgive." He stared at it like it might speak again. He didn't say a word when he carried it to the fire pit, just knelt, laid it down among the kindling, and struck a match. Ayana came out from the cabin, wrapped in his coat. She stood beside him, eyes on the flames as they caught. First smoke, then crackle, then the sharp hiss of old wood surrendering. The fire rose slow, licking the edges, curling the corners. The words burned last, "White man, forgive," until they were nothing but glowing ash. No ceremony, no prayer, just silence. Ayana didn't speak, but her hand found his, fingers curling into the worn cracks of his palm. He didn't pull away, didn't pretend the act had fixed anything. The sign was gone, but the message, it lingered in their blood. "I should have burned it sooner," he said quietly. She shook her head. Number it needed to be seen, then buried. The flames softened, then fell. The wood snapped once, like a bone breaking one last time. They stayed there long after the fire dimmed, side by side in the stillness. The desert stretched around them, vast and unblinking, but for the first time, the weight of what was didn't feel like a chain. It felt like something shed. Behind them, the cabin waited. Ahead, only open land. Ash rose like snow in the dark. Ayana let it fall on her skin without flinching. The past was gone, but she was still here, and he was still holding her hand. The saddlebags were worn, stitched, and restitched, but they held what mattered. Dried meat, water, a blanket, the last of the coffee. Calder moved through the motions like a man preparing for war, not flight. Every sound felt louder in the quiet. Buckle snaps, leather creaks, the faint whistle of wind against the eaves. Ayana stood by the fence line, hair braided back, his coat wrapped tight around her. She didn't look like a girl running. She looked like a woman choosing. When he turned to her, she didn't wait. "I don't want to be hidden anymore," she said, voice steady. "I don't want to be a weight you carry. I want to live beside you." As your wife Calder froze, the strap in his hand slipping loose. Her words didn't tremble. They landed. He stepped toward her, slow, close enough to see the flush rising in her cheeks, the defiance in her chin. "You sure?" he asked, voice rough from dust and something deeper. She nodded. "I've seen enough death. I want to build something, even if it's small, even if it's far." He didn't speak right away, just reached for her hand, brought it to his chest. "You already are," he said. "You already do." Then he leaned in, pressed his forehead to hers, breath mingling with hers in the cool morning hush. "I'll take you there," he whispered, "through fire if I have to." The promise wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It lived in the way his hands held hers, in the way her gaze didn't flinch, in the stillness between them that no longer felt like fear. By nightfall, 2 horses waited at the edge of the land. No note, no goodbye, just love packed in silence, riding toward freedom. The moon hung high, pale and watchful, as they rode through the narrow canyon trail. Ayana kept close behind Calder, her horse picking careful steps over stone. The desert around them was too quiet. Even the wind felt like it was holding its breath. Then came the crack. A single rifle shot tore through the night. Calder jerked in the saddle, the sound of impact dull and sickening. His body twisted, then slid from the horse like something boneless. Dust exploded where he landed. "Calder!" Ayana's scream split the dark. Another shot whistled past her, shattering stone inches from her leg. She leapt from the saddle, heart pounding, eyes wild. He was on his side, blood soaking his shirt, breath ragged. "Go," he rasped, trying to sit up. "Keep riding." No. Her hands were already under his arms, dragging him toward the rocks, gritting her teeth against the weight and the fear. Another bullet struck nearby, spraying dirt against her face. 2 riders appeared at the top of the ridge, dark shapes with rifles raised, hunting without mercy. Ayana didn't look back. She pulled him with everything she had, step by step, into a narrow gap between the cliffs. The rocks swallowed them whole. The riders didn't follow. Inside the shadows, she eased Calder down against cool stone. He groaned, blood hot on her palms. His eyes found hers, glassy but focused. "You said," he whispered, "you wanted to be my wife." She cupped his face, fingers trembling. "I meant it." He smiled, weak, crooked, real. "Then, we better live." She nodded, pressing her forehead to his, breath shallow. Behind them, the shots faded into silence. But in her chest, something roared louder than any gunfire. Love, wild and wounded, refusing to die. The canyon walls rose high around them, stone jagged and ancient, carved by time and things older than men. Night settled heavy, cloaking the world in silence, broken only by Calder's ragged breaths. He lay propped against the rock, skin pale, blood seeping through his side like the land itself had tried to claim him. Ayana crouched beside him, hands slick and shaking. She'd bound the wound with torn cloth, pressed hard to stop the bleeding, but it wasn't enough. Not here, not with death brushing so close. She looked up at the stars. They blinked cold and distant, no answers in their light. So she bowed her head and closed her eyes. She didn't know the settlers' god, had never spoken the names they used, but her father taught her the old ways, how to speak without words, how to give breath to the earth and trust it to answer. "Spirits of fire," she whispered, "don't take him." Not yet. Her hands pressed to the ground, to the stone beneath them. "Wind," she said, voice cracking, "carry the pain from him. Let me carry it instead." The canyon held her words, didn't echo, just listened. Calder stirred, his hand finding hers, weak but certain. "You praying?" he rasped. She nodded, brushing hair from his brow. "To what still listens." His eyes closed, a tremble in his jaw. "Then don't stop." She didn't. She sat there long into the night, whispering to fire, to wind, to the ghosts in the rocks. She spoke in her language, the one passed down through blood and grief and memory. Because out here, love was not soft. It was earned in dust and pain. And tonight, she would not let it die. The river near their new home didn't roar or rush. It whispered, steady, low, like a song meant only for those who'd bled to find it. Ayana named it without words. Just placed her hand on Calder's chest one morning and said, "Peaceful." And he understood. Weeks passed soft as breath. Calder healed slow, the wound stitching itself with time and Ayana's quiet hands. He still winced when he moved wrong, but there was strength in him again, steadiness in his step, enough to train a young mustang by the water's edge, murmuring low to the wild thing until it followed without fear. Ayana watched him sometimes, from the shade of the porch, a needle moving through soft white cloth. She was stitching a shirt no bigger than a sparrow, her belly rounded beneath the woven sash, and every thread she pulled seemed to anchor something deeper into the earth. She hummed when she worked, old melodies, half remembered from a mother long gone. Calder never asked what the songs meant. He just listened, and in the hush between notes, he heard everything. The cabin they'd built was simple: pine, hide, riverstone. No lock on the door, no sign on the wall. Inside were herbs hanging from the beams, 2 worn books, and a small blanket folded by the window, waiting. Calder would sometimes pause mid-task just to look at her, the way her fingers moved, the way her eyes softened when she caught him watching. He didn't say much, didn't need to. Peace didn't come loud. It came in the quiet drip of river water, the creak of wood as she sat down beside him, the weight of her hand on his knee. It came with her name, and the life they were making from nothing but love. The days stretched long and golden, the kind that made time feel slower, softer. The air smelled of sage and river water. On the porch, bunches of drying herbs swung gently in the breeze, their fragrance weaving through the open windows like a quiet blessing. There were no signs here, none nailed to trees, none carved into wood, none left behind to accuse or curse. Calder had burned the last one to ash, and Ayana had let the wind carry it. Inside the cabin, Ayana sat by the open door, the late sun spilling across the floorboards. Her fingers rested on her round belly, her breath even, her voice low. "You'll never know that place," she whispered. "The one with the ropes and the names carved in anger. You'll be born in a place with no signs." Her hand moved slowly, tracing a small circle over her stomach. "He didn't call me a savage. He didn't ask me to be less. He just saw me." Outside, Calder chopped wood at the edge of the yard, shirt clinging to his back, movement slow but steady. She watched him through the curtain, a small smile ghosting her lips. He looked up, felt her gaze, and nodded once. That was enough. Later, he came in, boots dusty, hands rough. He sat beside her, and they didn't speak. She laid her head on his shoulder, and they just listened, to the river, to the wind, to the breath of something neither of them dared name, but both believed in. No more signs, just the life they'd made from ruin. Just 2 voices, humming the same tune, and the quiet promise growing between them, small, strong, and free. The stars hung low that night, scattered across the sky like someone had spilled them with purpose. The river moved beside them, slow and constant, whispering over stone like it remembered everything, every wound, every prayer, every step that had brought them here. Calder lay on the grass, hands behind his head, boots off, hat tilted back. Ayana rested beside him, her head on his chest, one hand curled gently over his heartbeat. The baby shifted inside her, a quiet flutter that made her smile without speaking. No one had written stories about love like this, not in the towns, not in the books Calder had once read by lantern light. There were no ballads about a white rancher and the Apache girl he cut down from a tree. No poets brave enough to write of what comes after pain, after fear, when 2 people choose each other anyway. And yet, here they were. She whispered his name, just to feel it on her tongue. He turned his face toward her, eyes soft beneath the shadow of his brow. He reached for her hand, held it without needing to squeeze. "Reckon they'd say this shouldn't be," he murmured. "Let them say it," she answered. "They can't reach us here." He kissed her fingertips, one by one. Around them, the desert breathed. The wind shifted low through the grass, the water hummed over stone, and in the cradle of night, they were not outlaws or ghosts or scars. They were just 2 souls who had bled and burned, and still found each other whole. A kind of love, not forged in fairy tales, but in fire. And that's the kind that lasts. The kind that doesn't just survive the world. It makes the world pause to remember.